I was undercover for Special Grant in a jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy Podcast, the show which shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, and allows individuals, that's you, the listeners, to see behind that and understand the geopolitical world in which the secret world lives. Today, I've got my good buddy, Dan the Man, again with me. It's going to be the first episode of the new season. We did an overview last week. So it's, a new year as well. So how are you going, Dan?
Yeah, I'm not bad, thanks. Not bad. Yourself?
Not bad at all. I mean, I was thinking that what we should do today is basically have a look at what some of the listeners are saying and try and answer any of the questions.
Sure. Had a number of people contacting us, actually. A lot of queries regarding the late Sydney Poitier. We know he recently passed away. One, for example, here is just asking you how he impacted your life. Did he mean anything to your life at all?
Yeah, I'm with you, Dan. I think that's probably a good idea. But it's a big question. What does Sydney Poitier mean? What does a guy sitting out in the United States mean to a young black lad in the United Kingdom? I can tell you, actually, what he means. You won't understand this. I'm laughing because you can't understand it. But imagine, you're watching television where you could argue now there's an overabundance of black people on it. You could argue, I wouldn't, but you could do. Whereas then, you never saw a black person on TV. So, I'm talking about the early 60s. You'd only see people in two veins, I guess. That would be sports. So you'd see a boxer maybe now and then.
Yep.
And in the World Cup, you'd see, the Brazilian team and Portugal and teams like that, who might have some black players. There are very few African teams in. So that's what you'd see. So the sports angle, and obviously Olympic Games and running and stuff like that. But if you thought about it in terms of stars, television you want to look at, you'd hardly ever see any. And so in the 60s, to see a fella come out in movies, movies were the big thing, to see a fella come out in movies and be the star, absolutely incredible. It really was. And be a star in movies that weren't... Right, what I would say is, it's quite interesting. I found this fact out the other day. In 1912, right nigh on at the beginning of cinema, they had a depiction of a black fella who was the star of the show in a movie. That guy was a white guy, blacked up.
Blackface.
Right?
Yeah.
Blacked up. And what he was playing is, he was playing Uncle Tom's Cabin. I don't know if you know that, Uncle Tom's Cabin.
No.
Uncle Tom's Cabin, basically about, they call people Uncle Tom?
Yeah.
Basically, Uncle Tom's Cabin was an old black geezer who was very loyal to the rulers, to his master and that, and master that. So you have this white guy playing that sort of role. Now, in a way, Uncle Tom was a little bit more than just bowing down. He wanted change, but he wasn't really doing anything. Well, he couldn't really do it. Slave days. What's he going to do? Right. So that was his portrayal. It took another 5 decades, 50 years, until a black man took a leading part, and that was Sydney Poitier.
So he is the first black person to take a leading role in any movie, Hollywood movie.
In Hollywood movie, to be the leading star. Now, of course, you had supporting actors coming in now and then.
Yeah.
But in a Hollywood movie, blockbuster, proper movie, it's Sydney Poitier. And that is in itself. Now, what he did also, Sydney, is he played roles which historically people weren't aware of. So, for example, I remember him playing a Moorish king. So, like you got down in Granada in Spain, he played the king of the Moors. I mean, this is incredible. We weren't told that. We were told only blacks were slaves. Now, we used to sit as a family and wait to watch, to wait to watch on TV, a thing called Ironside. And what it was is, it was a lawyer who was a kind of a bit of a right-on lawyer. This is actually a bit later. This is like late 60s, early 70s. And he was, he used to be the chief of police and then he became a lawyer. Chief Ironside, he was called. White guy.
Yeah.
Lionel, I forgot his name. Anyway, that was him. And he'd got shot when he was the chief. And then, so, now as a lawyer, he was in a wheelchair. Right? This is the story. And Ironside, very good. And we sat down to watch because the guy used to wheel him round in the wheelchair. There was a fellow called Mark Sackner, I can still remember his name. And that was the representation he had. Right? Pushing around the wheelchair. And he was great. We said, we're looking like that. Then a little bit later, you got...
Not aspiring to much.
Exactly. You got Greg... And he was a criminal, by the way. He'd sort of rehabilitate. Then you got Greg Morris, which was fantastic. He was in Mission Impossible. He was the electronics man who did everything in Mission Impossible. So that was brilliant.
And this is before Sydney Poitier, you said?
No, around about the same time, but these were TV. So this is TV. And then you had Ironside. Then you had... but Poitier was already out by then. He was doing stuff. And I think because Poitier was out, they could bring these other people in.
Okay.
Then you had another TV series, which was Star Trek, which you know of today. Star Trek was incredible because Star Trek had officers who were black in it. Lieutenant Uhura, a black female, who was an officer on Star Trek. Incredible. You had this commander of the Starfleet, so above Captain Kirk, in charge of all the Starfleets, was this black guy. Right. So, but all this is made possible, I believe, because of Poitier.
Right, okay.
I mean, there were people before him, don't get me wrong, but nobody ever got the heights to what this guy got.
So what was it about him that made him get to do... Was he better than the next man in terms of acting? Did he have maybe a political stance that people liked? Or was he just... I mean, what was it that made him capture people's hearts?
I think he... Right, Sydney Poitier, as I understand it, went to school till he was about 12 years of age. He could hardly read when he left. He was born in the United States, in Florida, but was a Bahamian... His parents were Bahamian nationals from Bahamas, which is part of the United Kingdom's colonies of the time. And they took him back to the Bahamas, where he basically worked on a farm which his dad was running, where they picked tomatoes. So that's what they were doing. Now, this is interesting because he spoke in a Bahamian accent, and more importantly, even Bahamian patois. So he spoke patois. So he didn't really speak proper English. So he spoke the patois. And what happened is, when there wasn't, the farm fell, was no work. So he was getting a little bit wayward. So his dad sent him back to the United States because he was an American citizen, because he was born there, so he could go to his brother, so i.e. his uncle, for the uncle to help him.
Right, okay.
Right. But, of course, what did he have to offer? He basically was a dishwasher. That's what he was doing a lot. And he couldn't live properly in the South, because obviously Miami's the South, it's in Florida, and because of the racial laws of the time, because of the way things were, blacks just being pulled off the street, put in prison and all the rest of it, he felt he couldn't survive there. And later I saw a factual program, a documentary called Eyes on the Prize, fantastic. If you can ever get to see it, watch it. Eyes on the Prize was something special. And one of the comments in that program, and I know I'm jumping around a lot, but I'm coming back to you, Dan. One of the comments in that program, a guy said on it, normal everyday person, realistic, he said, I had to leave the South for my sanity. Because what he knew was, look at a person the wrong way, particularly a woman, and you could end up hanging from a tree with, and I'm going to say it, your balls cut off and being fed to dogs And this wasn't just people just by sometimes in these lynchings they did, they were basically whole towns would turn out to see it
come
happen.
out for a picnic.
So for a picnic, absolutely,
Yeah,
for a picnic, young kids for the picnic, you'd buy a man's willy when he's had his willy chopped off. You do this, that, and the other. The black guy who's getting lynched, and all that sort of. There used to be special trains which would go to some of these. This is obviously in the 1930s, 1940s, and Poitier is born 1920 odd, so he's around that sort of era.
Yeah.
And this could happen to you, so you had to be careful what you were doing, right? And say the wrong thing, and you could end up dead. Even 30 years later, the great case of the young guy... Bennett Till, exactly. Got it wrong, Bennett Till. This geezer, basically, coming from the north, playing with friends down there, he's only 13, didn't realise what the proper ways of acting were, as they would perceive it. His mates, he said, I've got a white girlfriend back in I think it was Chicago, was it, wherever it was.
Yeah.
And they said, no, you haven't. Yes, I have. So, well, if you have, what do you think of her then? And it was a white woman just walking by. And he said, she's beautiful. We tell her that. And they played him. And he said something like, hey, darling. And she said, what? Mm. And he leaves the shop. Next minute, he's, for want of a better word, kidnapped by the husband and several others. And he is beaten to a pulp. Murdered, obviously, beaten so badly that his face is like 10 times the size it was, and that's no exaggeration. Yeah. And he's left all beaten up and cut up. And he's just a young guy who knew no better. Yeah. So that's what that meant. So Poitier, even earlier than that, realised he can get in trouble staying down there, right? So he moved to New York.
Okay.
So he's looking for work. And he basically said I was working as a dishwashing fella because that's all I could do. Mm-hmm. And I was looking and I could read, but I couldn't read well. And I saw on one side, there's an African-American newspaper he was reading. And it said, on one side was dishwashers, on the other side actors. And he thought, I'll have a crack at this acting stuff. So he apparently went in to go and be an actor, just went down there, thought, I'll try and be an actor. And he went in, the fella said, all right. He said, he said, do you want, what year for? I said, I just want to be an actor. He said, you want to audition? He said, yeah. He said, have you done acting before? He said, oh, yeah, I was an actor down in Miami. I was doing this because it was right. He said, all right, good. He said, here, you read this, get this set, read it, and then when you're ready, tell me, and we'll work together on it to see how you are. Because obviously it's an all-black cast, so it'd be a black thing. So he said, I started off and he said, are you ready? Yep. I was walking down...
He was struggling.
So the fella grabbed hold of him. This is Sydney Poitier says it himself. So the fella grabbed hold of him by then and said, you're taking a Michael. And he was mad. He said, he was a big guy. And he grabbed me and said, you're taking a Michael. He says, listen, don't waste my time, you dishwasher. And threw him out. And he said, it didn't get till halfway I was getting back. I said, how did he know I was a dishwasher? Right?
Yeah.
Right? So he thought, is he saying that's all I can do?
Okay.
Be a dishwasher?
So that sort of riled him up.
Because it takes no brain to be a dishwasher because, there's nothing to... He said, so he decided that he's going to show this fella. And he spent his time learning to read and then learning to get a job. And he went back to the same place. Fella didn't know he was from Adam. He was no good. But he said, listen, didn't get chosen. He said, listen, if I act as a janitor for you, because I'm just looking around, I see you got no janitor, would you give me the lessons? So they did give him the lessons. So they acted as a janitor. So that's how Poitier gets in. So the reason why I tell that story is he is driven.
Yeah.
He wants to be something more. Now, I know that feeling because I had that when at one stage, years back, I had this a girlfriend and I went in to the place and the mother, one of his great movies is called Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. And he's a doctor. He plays a doctor in it, well-educated doctor, and the girl is white, and she's a nurse, and her parents are very, very wealthy, and it's in New York, and they think we can, she's getting a doctor, brilliant, never seen him, and so he turns up at the door, and the girl's meant to be sat down talking to the mother, saying, "Oh, he's fantastic, he's this, he's that, he's the other." Don't mention his colour because he don't mean anything to her, right? And then the door opens and the mother's all thinking, brilliant, we got her married off to a doctor. And the door opens up, she sees this black fella and her face is, you see her face, and it's brilliantly played. Now, I had that sort of thing. When I went to door, knocked on the door, so I'm invited in for a Christmas meal or whatever it was. And the mother opened the door, her face went, obviously you can't see, this is your listening, but the face that she pulled was incredible. And she put me at one side of a very, very long table, the girl on the other side of a very, very long table. And that was it. And then the father said, you're going to end up as a pauper and all this sort of stuff. So that does motivate you.
Yeah, of course.
So I can see how that guy was motivated. Yeah. So that's a brilliant thing. So, yeah, in answer to your question, I think what he brought was a
sense of hope, maybe?
A sense of hope, a sense of wanting to do it, a sense of really learning his craft, a sense of, because he wasn't speaking American, relearning how to speak. Yeah? So when he spoke, his diction was superb. It was very, very clear. He wasn't speaking like an American accent just like that, because he had to have learnt it. So when he spoke, he was speaking very clear. So you could put him in any part. He had gravitas.
Yeah. I think I mentioned it earlier, actually, and I just queried about his political stance. Obviously, you're saying that the time that he was around the same sort of era as the civil rights movement. Did he receive any sort of hate from people because he was obviously this big star, and then the racial tensions at the time? Was he openly political and trying to push equal rights for the black community? Where did he stand politically? Did he have any sort of views in regards to that? And was he an advocate for equal rights with black people?
Yeah, look, Dan, he was, and I think his strength was that he was exactly that, but he did it in a way that made him revolutionary, yet the revolutionaries thought he wasn't. And I think that made the white community in general, obviously white races is never going to get to them, but the white community in general think that he was safe. Yeah, a safe person.
Break that down for me when you say that he was revolutionary, but not in a revolutionary way.
Right. I think he knew that. Right, what you've got to realise, going back to those 60s, 1960s, early 60s, there was kind of three thoughts about where the black community should go. And I think some of the white supremacists liked one angle in a strange way, and that was black separatism. They liked the idea of black separatism. They just didn't want them in the United Kingdom, in the United States. So they were happy. If you said to the American Nazi Party, to any of the right wings, even the generalised right wing of, say, the Republican Party, and to be truthful, even some Southern Democrats, if you'd have turned around and said, I think all black folks should go back to Africa, they'd say, yeah, great. Just get rid of it. That'd be great. So you had that black separatism element that was that blacks were living separately than white people, generally in America, as it still is today, in a lot of separate areas. And I think that somebody who preached black separatism wasn't as dangerous to them as somebody who spoke about getting what you want within integration. Now, Martin Luther King, was for that, getting what you want within integration in a non-violent way and all the rest of it. Yeah. Malcolm X, on the other side, was for black separatism, but black separatism by any means necessary, violently. I'll take what I want. And so he's dangerous. This geezer's dangerous. King is dangerous because he's bringing the working classes and the whites together. So he is dangerous as well. But it's the lesser of two evils. So if I put to you that Poitier was more like King, but provided the blacks with a position of, what's the best word I can use? Of gravitas. It's that, where you can put your chest out. That is frightening to people who were white supremacists, because what they'd lived off is the fact that black people thought that, putting it frankly, that they were niggers, right? They thought they were nobody, who had nothing, who could do nothing, and that's a great position, because now we would still need you to work for us, yeah? So we'll have you working for us, but from that perspective of you've never done anything. Now, if you can play in a movie that you have done something, that you are a Moorish king, so that now brings history in. Hey, hang on, these fellas were running this, that, the other. Yeah? That in the cowboy years, he did some cowboy movies, that there were blacks in the cowboy times who were powerful. That, this now starts bringing a position in that's not great. So these guys, I think, feared him. But for the guys who were sort of laissez-faire, the average white fellow and woman who's not about... Now, we do need to say this. I think this is quite important. in this modern day, we start talking about bad people in civil rights, and we're always talking about men. No, that's rubbish. Men and women hated black people. It wasn't just men.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And in fact, some of the, when you go back, and I'm a great historian, and so I go back to a lot of the things, especially in the historian of the 60s and looking at it, many of the demonstrations are actually caused by women. Many of them say, we don't want these in our schools, we don't want them doing this, don't do that. And you'll see women on the front line saying, get rid of them. And men having to react to show that they are men.
I see that. It's that male sort of.
Yeah, exactly.
Ego.
So, I've got to show, because otherwise, my wife. So you see that, and there was a good movie just recently actually called Them, which actually showed that when the black people came in onto the street, the first black family came in, the men didn't like it, but they weren't that bothered. It was a woman who got the heat going to get rid of them, because of course she's been brought down in her social circle because there's a black geezer living on the streets.
Yeah.
And a black family. So it's all about looking right. Now, I think that, so I wanted to put that in. It's we've got this idea that it's all one thing. And for the working class whites, it's kind of understandable in some ways, because they've been told that they're better than blacks. If you're then living with blacks or competing with blacks and blacks are winning, who are you? And there's another great movie, and I think it was done by Scorsese, where he basically had a role in it where the father who was involved in this movie and who took part with some Klansmen to get rid of a black guy who was actually really his friend, but he couldn't show it. And the two sons were friends. When he helps chase the black guy off to save his life in a strange way, because otherwise they're going to lynch him, the son says, why have you done this, Daddy? Daddy, he's in the South, why have you done this? He says, because if you ain't better than a nigger, who is you better than? And that's the thing. When the lad grows up, if he's not better than a black fella, well, where's he standing? Right? So this is the real situation of the time. And I think that most people who probably had nothing to gain by it wouldn't have really been over the top. But because the system was that way, you're playing within the system. Because it takes a lot of brave people to stand out when you gain nothing from it to go against the system. You know, you've got to be realistic to that factor. If I'm a white guy and I can just keep my head down and I'm just going to get on with my job, and so if this black geezer loses his job and I might take his role over, or he can't get the role that I've got, why should I go out against that? That's a brave guy who turns around and says, no, I'm going to go for that. That's not right. He should not be able to have that. Because I'm cutting down my chances. So Poitier, I believe, understood this, right? And in understanding that, he's in working in this movie industry to get that over. I think Poitier does it well. Now, what he gets hurt by, just to answer your question, I think, is that the young revolutionaries don't see that. The young guys, and there's a newspaper article that says Poitier is an Uncle Tom. Okay. And Poitier puts it hurts him to the core. And indeed, he leaves the United States for about a year and doesn't live there, and doesn't work for about a year. Because it's cut him to the core. Right. Because he's a fella trying to do something, but it's not being seen as him doing something. And he's perceived as a fella who's just an Uncle Tom.
Okay. So you're saying he's perceived by his own people?
The revolutionists.
Okay.
The ones who do or die guys who are going to make it happen. In the Black Panther Party or whatever, which has its place, don't get me wrong, I can see. But is somebody in the Black Panther Party for self-defence losing as much as Sydney Poitier is? This is the point. So it's quite an interesting thing. So I understand how young revolutionaries will say, this fella's not moving fast enough, he's moving too slow, we need to move quicker. Yeah, which is what happened, they're saying about King. And so they're saying King's soft, they're saying King isn't putting himself out, and that's the same sort of thing they're saying against Poitier, when every day King is at threat of losing his life. Yeah. They aren't saying that, because it's not happening quick enough. And don't be wrong, they're probably right, it needs to happen quick. But this is the big dichotomy, isn't it, of struggles. Who's paying the price?
That's interesting, it's very interesting. And am I right in saying that he won an Oscar as well, so Sydney Poitier?
He did, he won the Oscar. I mean, unheard of in 1963.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The fact that the racial tensions were so high, and then for this big black star to then come onto the scene and win an Oscar, did that have an impact?
Absolutely, he became somebody. Once you win an Oscar, you can't hide. You are somebody. And he won the Oscar for his acting in it. And not acting as some clown.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The role he played that he won the Oscar for, he was, a stand-up guy in it. He wasn't, some idiot. And so, again, you look at his movies like In the Heat of the Night, which is another great movie which he did with Rod Steiger, where and I saw that movie, and I can remember that movie like it was yesterday when I first saw it. I remember this guy who's in the South, who basically what happens is he goes into this town and he just gets caught up overnight because the train's not there, and he has to stay in the train, and he goes to the police station, and the reason why he goes to the police station is he wants to call the police back in the place where he is, because he is a detective in the police,
right, okay.
but in a major city in the north, and they have a murder at the same time, and he's arrested for the murder, right? And then he proves who he is and all the rest of it, and he's not arrested and he's let go. But these hicks in this town can't investigate the murder, and basically his boss says, I'll leave this guy with you because he's my top homicide detective.
Okay.
So he actually starts doing the investigation, okay, in this southern town, where if you look at a fellow the wrong way, you're hanging from a lamppost. And it's just how he does that. And there's one part in it, he says, well, what do they call you then? Because they call him Boy. Yeah, he said, Boy, said July. He said, what do they call you then up in, is it Detroit or wherever he's from? I can't remember the city right now off the top of my head. And he says, they call me Mr. Tibbs. Just that line is powerful. They call me Mr. Tibbs. Yeah, not boy as you're being called down in the South. There's two terms for you in the South, as there was in most of the British Caribbean, the British colonies. You are boy when you're young, up to about 50,
Right,
and you're uncle when you get older, right? Because you're never Mister, right? So this they call me Mr. Tibbs. So you need to understand that context. And sometimes when we see these films and stuff like that, we don't understand the context behind them, about how the times were. So, and then there's one where he goes back to the richest guy in the area and who's probably organised this murder. And basically what happens is the guy slaps him because he's not talking right to him, you see, because who's this black guy talking to him? So he goes out and he slaps him in his face. And Sydney Poitier goes back and slaps him back at him. And the Rod Steiger, great actor, who's playing the, I guess you call him the chief of police in the area, he looks flipping heck. And the fella says, I would have had you boiled and lynched and your skin cut from you, all that sort of stuff. Brilliant. It's a brilliant movie. It's really worth watching.
What's it called?
It's called In the Heat of the Night.
In the Heat of the Night.
Fantastic. Got to be watched.
I'll have to give it a go.
Got to be watched. Got to be watched, guys, if you're out there. In the Heat of the Night. Brilliant movie. So, this is Sydney Poitier. He, and by the way, the Spencer Tracy one where he's going to marry this white girl.
Yeah.
And they're from an affluent family. It's Catherine Hepburn, great actress. Spencer Tracy, great actor. These are royalty, Hollywood royalty. These people playing the parts next to him are putting themselves at threat in terms of will they still get work after? Now, because they're so bigger stars, these two probably will. But you can see that the smaller stars. So the actress who plays the wife in that, the woman who wants to be his wife, is she going to get work in the United States after that? People don't understand this. I remember one, Harry Belafonte, who is his great mate, black guy, also from the Caribbean, came to America. He is a great guy, really good-looking fella like Poitier. And he plays, he's with, what is she called? British singer, superb. She had a show in the United States, married a Frenchman subsequently. I'll remember her name in a while. Great singer. And basically, she has her own show, and she wants Harry Belafonte in the show. So they start singing, and in the show, they hold hands. And they say, no. Ford, Coca-Cola, they all say, we're taking our money out of the show.
That's great.
You hold hands with this Negro, and they're not using those words. Your show's finished. And she said, well, I want that in the show. So it's done, and she doesn't work. She don't work. So she's working then, she goes to France, then works in France. Right. So that's what you're dealing with. It's not something that's nice and easy. Your whole career can be gone. Yeah. So how Poitier is able to actually negotiate that, it's like a minefield. He must be walking, to try and find parts that are right, try and find leading ladies who will play the part with him, and all the rest of it. This is difficult for the guy. It's super difficult.
So did you openly see, obviously I'm a lot younger than you, so I've not witnessed any of this. Did you openly see that things changed then after Sir Sydney Poitier came onto the scene? Did we start seeing more black actors getting leading roles in films and movies, or did it still take time? Did it still take time?
Yeah, took massive time. I think I saw the changes more in, as I said to you, in the TV, which I think opened up ways for others. Others did come on board, but not necessarily in the full leading parts like Sydney Poitier was. And then you started getting your Denzel Washingtons and stuff later on. And if you listen to Denzel's speech when he got his Oscar for Training Day, great movie by the way, right? He said, "I stood on Sydney Poitier's shoulders."
Okay.
Yeah? Without Sydney Poitier, I would not be here. Right? I would not be here. So that's what you're getting. You're getting people coming into the game because of people like Poitier. Yeah. His poise, his way of speaking, everything about the fella. He's special.
Okay, so, I mean, playing devil's advocate here then, the fact that we had this unheard of, unseen, we've got a black guy on screen now. Some might have said that he only received that Oscar just purely because this is the first time we've seen this, a black guy in a leading role. Do you agree with that?
No, because well, first thing is, he played some leading roles before and didn't get the Oscar for it. He was nominated in one of the earlier movies which he did, which is another great movie. Now, I've just forgotten, my memory is getting to be like a sieve these days, but I've just forgotten the name. He played with Tony Curtis in the Defiant Ones, that's what it's called. Good movie, watch it. And they both were kind of nominated because of how they acted. That was some 5 years earlier. So it wasn't the first time he was lead, but he shared the lead billing with Tony Curtis, which is a bigger star in those days. So it wasn't the first time he played. The other thing is, that sort of statement that you make there, Dan the Man, is a statement of 2022, whereby people might turn around and say, yeah, we're giving you something because you're black. Believe me, back in 1963, you got nothing because you were black. There was no such thing as anti-racism then in those days. It was called a spade, right? That's how it was, And it was said that presidents, I'm not saying President Kennedy now, but presidents before him, Truman example, it was said that Truman never referred to a black man other than calling him a nigger. Okay. Except when he was actually physically doing something where many people were present, and he maybe had to say that a Negro did something. But otherwise, when he spoke openly to people, he just called them niggers. Right? So that's your president. So that's giving you some idea of what the systems and what were like in those old days. You also had to realise that the army, which later did bring it together, until about 48, was segregated. So blacks, one part of it, whites in another. Right? Always white officers, of course. Officers were white, but blacks in one, officers in another. So this is indeed, actually, there's an argument here that says we were calling America the, if you will, the leader of the free world. I actually find that an insult. I find it an absolute insult. That could you imagine if there was a country whereby, let's say Jewish people, couldn't sit at the lunch counter where they wanted to, where they couldn't get taxis to drive around, etc., just by the sheer view of looking at you. Now, we can talk about Nazi Germany, which I know very well. From just looking at somebody, the European Jewish person might not stand out. In fact, 99.9% of the time wouldn't stand out. Yeah, unless you were wearing a kippah or whatever. So you wouldn't stand out. So, and people were going to universities, etc. You got to look at the United States. They weren't allowing people in their universities, black people, particularly in the South. You had all black universities, which blacks set up themselves. But, they had to bus people. They had to have the National Guard out, which is the military. This is in Kennedy's time. That's how late it is. The actual military out to escort one little girl into a school.
I remember seeing that, yeah.
I mean, this is incredible. And you're calling this the free leader of the free world? When literally at that stage, American population is probably about 260 odd million people, of which at that time, probably about 30 million of them were black. So you're probably looking at maybe about less than a quarter were black of your population is treated like absolute third-class citizens, where they're being hung from trees, left, right and centre, dragged behind cars, not being educated, thrown in prison. Laws were made up, they call them the loitering laws, where it said, after sundown, no black person can be walking on the street. And if you do, you get nicked. as a vagrant. I mean, this is incredible. And we're calling that the free world? General Powell died recently. Great guy, whom I know. General Powell is fighting in Vietnam. Okay? He's a colonel at Fort Bragg. He's got all scrambled egg on him because he's got all the medals he's got, all over him. And some hick copper turns up, right? In his car, you can see him, some boys, spitting out that type of officer. I'm not calling the officers down who want to do that. That's just the way it is. But turns around and says, "Boy, where you going?" He's in uniform, full uniform. "Boy, where you going?" He says, "I'm going to Fort Bragg." He says, General Powell writes this. He says, "Don't you stop, boy, because out here you just plain old nigger."
That's that ego thing.
Right. You're just plain old nigger out here. Right? Right, you get on your base, you might be somebody. But out here, hang on, I'm working for the Federal Army of the United States of America. I've served 3 tours in Vietnam. I put myself online. I'm a special forces guy. And I'm just plain old nigger. You got no respect for me. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
That's America then. So they're not giving you anything. Right? There's nobody turning up saying, "Oh, let's leave this black fella Poitier," because we'll just have a black fella getting it. That's not the way it works there then. Indeed, I would put my up and say those, because obviously they were all white in the Academy Award. I would say all of them were relatively brave, because all of them could have taken a hit. Yeah. There'll be people who will have been saying in big companies and big corporations, "Why have you given the Oscar to this fella?"
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Southerners in particular, who want to keep the way that they're living. Because this is 1963, and this is where bombs were going off to prevent blacks doing stuff. Yeah. So, no, nobody give that guy anything. That's what we've got to realise. And you hear all these young bucks there, "Oh, I wouldn't have stood for that. I wouldn't have."
I was one of those. I used to say that, yeah.
"Oh, after. Yeah, all right, mate. You've been hanging from a tree, son, as well." With your nuts being chopped off and people laughing at you. This is. I'm saying it as it is. This is reality. And don't get me wrong, it's not just men they were killing like that.
Hanging women as well.
Right.
Raping.
You know Rosa Parks?
Yeah.
Right, Rosa Parks. You hear about Rosa Parks on the bus?
Yeah, of course.
Right, okay. What they don't tell you is Rosa Parks was an activist in the NAACP. And Rosa Parks actually sat in the bus because of her anger of what was happening. They had one woman there who was raped by 6 guys. Took her, raped her. That one. Threw her away. Yeah. Thought nothing of her. Just threw her away. Didn't kill her. Threw her away. Can't do anything. Half of them were all billed with police. Yeah. In their area. And never went anywhere near a court. And it was never going to go anywhere near a court. Because, of course, the judge is involved. They're all involved. So the whole system in the South was against it.
It's rigged, yeah.
Right, was rigged. And you talked about Emmett Till earlier on.
Yeah.
Right? So when he was murdered and his mother came down to the trial, a United States congressman for her area came down, right, to see the trial and how it was functioning. He's a congressman, same as an MP, potentially even higher, right? And he walks down to walk to the front. And the judge, "Boy, where you going?" Cameras there, everything.
Yeah.
I'm taking a seat. "I'm United States Congressman," whatever his name was, I forgot the name. "You just plain old nigger here, boy, get your ass back in the back." So nobody's found guilty there.
Yeah, of course. Of course, yeah.
There's nobody being found guilty there. So that's what you were dealing with. And all these young fellows who turn around and say, I'd be telling them, you'd be telling them nothing. right, because you'd be losing your life. Now, don't get me wrong, maybe you do a pitched battle like some of the Black Panthers were, and they died, fighting the old battle with the old Bill, but they just did.
Yeah.
So that's why I said earlier on when that guy said, and it always struck a chord with me, and he said, "I had to leave the South for my sanity." I mean, that's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
A powerful statement. And so people like Poitier and the way that they navigate through this system of the whole world saying, this is the United States and we're looking up to the United States. It is the leader of the free world, right? You are doing everything right. Yeah, you might be treating your black folk a little bit bad. But, other than that, not even other than that, it's just you are the leader of the free world. Yeah? I mean, this is incredible. You get a fellow like Muhammad Ali, In fact, we're going to have to leave soon, but we're going to have to because we come into our timings, as you know, with the show, Dan. But take Muhammad Ali. What did Muhammad Ali do with his medal that he won the gold medal? Do you know what he did? He threw it in the river.
Give it back or something, didn't he?
Threw it in the river, mate. Because he went to sit down at the lunch counter and they told him, on your bike. He couldn't even sit down to eat his food.
Heavyweight champion of the world.
Right? Couldn't even sit down to his food. He's Olympic champion of heavyweight, Olympic champion for the United States and couldn't even eat his food. Right? That's how much they think of him. There's one fella, very good programme. If you ever get, again, there's some really good documentary programmes. And one of them is called Vietnam. And it's a superb one. And basically, it looks at the Vietnam War all the way through. And it talks about how it worked and the rest of it. And there's one guy there, he's been out, he's he's a tunneler. And in fact, when I worked for the American, you know, back in the 70s, and I saw some good people there, black, white, Hispanic, whatever. And by the way, I don't think that black and white is only a problem within the white community. It's also in the Hispanics. You know, black Hispanics are often not perceived as good as white Hispanics by Hispanics. You know, you've got to see it as it is. Right? So, anyway, and even the way, I've got to say this, because it's, imagine, if you were a Mexican, you were at one stage white, as it was perceived by Americans. They were then changed to being blacks, then they were changed to being whites again. All because of the American Census Board, how it worked it. And each time it was changing, their life chances were either going down or back up again. Right? So do you want to be a black? No, you don't. I can get away without being one. I can be called something different like Hispanic. I'll have that. Thank you very much. You know, so that's how people are. So I'm not understanding the natural geopolitical aspect of people. But we've got to understand how we get into this predicament and how racism is the one thing. Yes, there's a lot of different isms, but racism based on colour. I don't even like the word race because I think it's a nonsense, and I've said this many times. It's an absolute biological nonsense. It's a political reality, but absolute biological nonsense. In fact, I'm not even going to call it race anymore. I'm just going to call it colour. Yeah. Because, you see, this idea of colour is something you cannot change. You can hide a whole host of other things. You can be a Catholic, a Protestant, a Jewish person. You can be a Muslim. You can be whatever. You can hide all that. You can hide it all. And you could pretend, well, I'm not going to wear this or wear that shows me as to what I am. I'll pretend I'm not gay. I'll do whatever you want to do. Yeah, I'll pretend I'm not that. I'm not saying you should do that. It's wrong to have to do that. But I'm saying you can pretend it. You cannot pretend you're not of the colour. You can be Michael Jackson and try and change it. And I'm not calling Michael down there, don't get me wrong. Yeah. It's
but everyone still knows.
It's a movie, again, another movie, because we're talking about movies here, which actually says it very, very well. You ever seen the movie The Three Kings?
I think, yeah, I have. I have seen it, yeah.
I went through a similar thing, actually, in the last Gulf War, when I was with the American. I was there as a Brit, but I was doing something. And an American colleague of mine, who I knew from when I used to work for the American, he told me the story of how when Saddam was defeated, that some servicemen actually found in a wall, it was something like literally 5 billion, something like that.
Cash?
Yes.
Yeah.
In
or was it
dollars.
Billion?
In dollars. It was dollars. It was, I think it was euro, am I right in saying? Euro and pounds, different currencies, which obviously Saddam people, and some of his people had nicked and obviously hidden, and he'd hidden a lot of stuff himself. And they found it, these lads. A unit it was. And they know, obviously, as soldiers, you can't keep it. You know, you meant to hand it in. Yeah. But they didn't, right? So they handed in the vast majority of it, and they kept for themselves hundreds of millions. Literally, hundreds of millions. And this guy who I know, he was the Army CID guy in charge, so special agent in the CID. So he was telling me, and he actually took me down to the vaults. And the reason why I'm going to tell you is I'm going to explain what the Three Kings was about later on. He took me down to the vaults, and he had soldiers, MPs, military police, every 20 metres with machine pistols. And in those vaults was like 800 million worth of dollars. Billion, sorry, worth of dollars. in those vaults, right? Well, all it was gold, this, all sorts of stuff, treasury of Iraq, right? Boom, it's all there, in there. He says, but this is in Saddam's palace. He said, this is where it is in the palace. He said, but obviously some of his henchmen had nicked stuff and looked after himself. Yeah, the aim was to go back in a bag, get away somewhere. They got loads of money, Swiss bank account, everybody's happy, right? So these guys have found this, so they agree. We're not handing it in. We'll hand in the resident, but what we'll do is we'll hide it up for ourselves.
Take a bit for ourselves, yeah.
Which they did, hundreds of millions, right? So they did, but one guy can't keep it, and one guy, instead of, because it was shipping it back to the States, they found a way to ship it back on a military airlift command. So one guy, though, he can't wait, and he stole some of it from it. He's going to get it when he goes back, but he can't wait. And he starts buying a whole load of things in the PX, because they had the PX, the Post Exchange, which is their sort of area. That's whom I used to work for at one stage as a detective. It's their areas where they basically sell everything for the troops. Everything is sold to them. Right, so this guy's buying all this, and then he starts talking to somebody about it, to a female soldier, showing off to her. Anyway, they get captured, don't they? Now, so that's what the Three Kings is about in the movie. But on the earlier Gulf War, they also find monies going. Okay, and that's what it's about. So that's where the connection is. So I saw the real bit in the real thing, but earlier they'd done this with the Three Kings. Now, they should have seen that movie, these guys, kept their mouth shut. That's how you get away with it. Anyway, they didn't. So, to the spoils of war and all that. So, cut a long story short, in the Three Kings, in the real one, 1990s, first Gulf War, they find all this money, these troops, and they try and get the money for themselves. Now, one of them gets captured by an Iraqi intelligence officer. Mm-hmm. And he's questioning him. He's got a real Brooklyn accent, all American like that, the Iraqi officer, because he's lived in the States.
Yeah.
And he says one thing that, I think it's another Scorsese movie, I'm not sure, but it might be. And he says, because he's informed like that, he said, one thing that I thought was brilliant in the show, he said, you see they got Michael Jackson, I love, and he's playing, and he's torturing this geezer, right? And they're playing Jackson music, right? Well, they're torturing him, pulling his teeth out, whatever else, trying to find out what the score is from this American. And he says, what a fucked up country that is. Excuse my language, guys, but I'm quoting the movie. And he says, what a fucked up country this is. He says, you got the greatest musician in the world, and he can't enjoy himself because he's black. True. And he wants to be white because the system is all about white. And he explains that. And he says it in the movie. And I thought, that is truthful. This is Jackson. He's told that he's ugly because he's got a big nose, he's got big lips, he's got this and that, and he's trying to change himself all the way through. And
you think mentally as well for people, I mean, that's Michael Jackson, he's got everything in the world, and he's feeling like that. So imagine how Joe Bloggs is feeling.
Exactly. And that's the thing with the Poitier era. You've got the Poitier era on steroids. Mm-hmm. If you think you or others are suffering racism today, you should have lived then. Right? And for people who turn around and say, oh, there's no difference, they're dreaming. I was born in 1950s. I know the difference.
Yeah.
There is a massive difference. I was brought up with a lot of great people who were white, who, my grandparents were white. I call them white. They call them my grandparents, not the real one, but I call them that. And I learned a lot from them. Our families, they looked after us. They were great folk. So I'm not saying everybody's one way. No way, shape or means. Mm-hmm. But believe me, you could come outside your door, you see National Front or whatnot with massive flags saying, blacks get back. We used to go to Manchester, you see a sign saying, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. And it always said no blacks. Sometimes it said no dogs. But people like dogs, so generally it's all right. And then there's no Irish, right? Sometimes there's no Irish, but always blacks. Right? So this is what you got. And there was nothing against that. It was just totally normal. Mm-hmm. Natural. I'd be on a football team. I've been playing football for a 3rd division team in the reserves. And I've seen another 3rd division, which is what now? Championship? No, it'd be League One. League One team. So I'm playing for a League One team. Imagine this. A League One team, right? And the manager of that League One team says to the defender, because I'm a winger, if that nigger gets past you, shouting out, if that nigger gets past you, you will not play again. bit that fucking nigger's legs, right? Not a word from anybody. Frankly, not a word from me.
Yeah.
That's because I'm like expecting that.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying,
I'm
yeah.
like expecting it.
It's mad.
Right? So I can only imagine what, and that's 70s, yeah? So that's like 73 or something like that, 72. So I can only imagine what Poitier is putting through. 20 years earlier.
Yeah.
In the United States, where it's even worse.
Yeah.
Right? So the idea that, coming back to what you were saying, that he's given something? No. No. And guys and gals, listeners, I'm going to leave you on that one. I thought it was important to give you an understanding of why Sydney Poitier is perceived as great. Dan the man's a much younger man. He has not lived through that, so he himself was wondering, and it's great that he suggested that should be done. Because, quite a few people have spoken about it. Why is he such a great guy? And I don't know if they're saying, why is he such a great guy? Because he is such a great guy, or why is it that he's been given such a great guy because they don't know? Anyway, so I've tried to explain which it was. Have you learned something, Dan, by the way?
I have, yeah, 100%. It's a bit of an insight into the times back then, a bit of an eye-opener, really.
Does it make sense to you then?
Yeah, 100% makes sense to me, yeah. I just find it crazy. I mean, now we look at telly and we see so many black people on TV playing leading roles. So, yeah, he must have had a massive impact. Obviously, I've seen a lot of tributes going out to him from various people. So, yeah, he must have been a mega star, really.
Well, if you recall, I had Winston on the show, Winston Ellis.
Yeah.
And Winston put on himself RIP and explained how he saw Sydney Poitier and how he got into the movies. Now, don't get me wrong, Roger Moore had said to Winston, and if you haven't listened to the Winston sit down that I had with Winston, it's fantastic, you should listen to it. But Roger Moore had said to Winston, you need to come back to Britain and be in the Western movies. Because if you haven't learned, Winston was doing a lot of Kung Fu movies in the East. So Roger Moore, a white guy. So we're not tying anybody with the same brush here.
Yeah, of course.
He had said to him, listen, Winston, get yourself back to the West and get in. So we're not anti anybody. What we are saying is these were the times, and to understand the legacy of Sydney Poitier, you need to understand the times that he lived in. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. All the best, and we hope to see you again next week.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.